Welcome to Alpine Daily for Tuesday. Lately on Tuesdays, we've been talking about how to live with outward purpose and thinking about that in our lives. And a big part of that is how we view the people around us. And you can see that here in Luke chapter 7 in verses 37 and following. It says, when a woman who had been living a sinful life in that town learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house, she brought an alabaster jar of perfume, and as she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. When the Pharisee who invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she's a sinner. Well, that Pharisee was named Simon, and as Simon watched this play out, he was making assessments. He was like a judge at an Olympic event. He had his scorecard out, ready to make an evaluation of this woman, and the way he evaluated her is that she was a sinner. And it's true, verse 37 said that she'd lived a sinful life in that town, so she'd earned a reputation for a certain lifestyle. We don't know what. Maybe she was a prostitute. Maybe she made her way through crime. But Simon labeled her and categorized her according to that reputation. But what's interesting is that Simon also assessed Jesus negatively. You know, he felt it was inappropriate for Jesus to have contact with this woman. His first assumption being that some people are so intrinsically unclean spiritually that they'll contaminate you just because of who they are. And his second assumption is that these people will not or cannot change. And so he reasoned if Jesus was a prophet, he would know who or what she was, and he would not have anything to do with her in that case. And we're all guilty of that. Each one of us assesses the people around us in our own way. You know, we think, oh, he's overweight, or she's cute, he's rich, she's shallow. We usually do that without even knowing all the facts of that person's life, and certainly without knowing what was going on in their heart. And so like Simon, we make these judgments based on mere assumptions, outward appearances that can be completely erroneous. And that's one factor that prevents us from being able to help other people pursue God. Because we want to keep people at arm's length because we see them in a negative way. You know, some of us think if only we could have an impact on people around us without actually having to have anything to do with them personally, that would be our ideal. But by contrast, I wanted you to take a look at Jesus and how he treated this woman. He speaks to Simon in verse 46. He says, you did not put oil on my head, but she's poured perfume on my feet. Therefore I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, for she loved much. And then down in verse 50, he said directly to her, Jesus said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. So Jesus saw this woman very differently than Simon did. He saw a woman who was forgiven. He saw a woman who loved him dearly. And rather than reject contact with her because of her past, Jesus accepted her worship. He accepted her love. He could see that here was someone who had received the grace of God and was being changed by it. And likewise, every person you meet is a potential candidate for God's grace. Simon thought he thought he had it all figured out, but often the people who seem least likely or the farthest from the grace of God may be the greatest candidates for his grace. And so before we can be part of what God is doing in the world, it takes a fundamental change of attitude toward people, from being judgmental to being hopeful, from being prejudiced to seeing the possibilities of how God can work in people's lives.